Lord Byron was a second generation romantic poet, born in 1788, and he's most famous for his epic comedic poem Don Juan. And for the most part, he wrote long poetry. But a few times in his life, he wrote short lyrical poems, and he was exceedingly good at it. They were very good. And this poem we're going to read today is, I think, his best of those lyric poems. It's a small, fragile little thing that is just there to give us this momentary atmospheric joy and desire to go out at night under the moon with our loved one, even when we can't. So we'll go no more a roving, so late into the night, though the heart be still as loving, and the moon be still as bright. For the sword outwears its sheath, and the soul wears out the breast, and the heart must pause to breathe, and love itself have rest. Though the night was made for loving, and the day returns too soon, yet we'll go no more a roving by the light of the moon. This poem, written when Byron was 29, is a poem of aging. He wants to be going out late at night, roving under the moon with his loved one, but he's getting old. I suppose 29 was quite old in those days. People got unhealthy fast, and Byron did live a very fast life. Things to note about this poem are that it's written in a sort of ballad meter, so that's a mix of lines that are 4 beats or 3 beats. So we'll go no more a roving, so late into the night. So you can see that's 4 followed by 3. And in fact, the opening line, so we'll go no more a roving, is based on a line from a traditional Scottish ballad with slightly changed wording because the Scottish people have a very strange way of speaking that isn't actually English, it's Scots. It's a slightly different language. But the original lines up almost exactly with what Byron's gone for here. And Byron, in fact, was partly Scottish and spent a lot of time in Scotland. Another thing to note is that it's slightly broken in its meter, but this is very, very common in ballads. Ballads were, at the time that this poem was being written, making a resurgence in literary writing. Previously, they had been considered something just for the general public, the non-reading public, the hoi polloi. Now, the romantic poets were raising those ballads up to be actually considered by them to be some of the greatest literature ever written. And that's why we get a lot of ballads in the Romantic era. Prior to that, in the Augustan era, we got no ballads really. They did not consider that we had a lot of ballads from the general public, but not from literary poets like what we would call Lord Byron. And in this tradition, it can be a little messy because traditionally literary poets liked to be neat and tidy, but ballad poets, they liked a bit of messiness. And we can see that in this poem. So we'll go no more a roving so late into the night, though the heart be still as loving and the moon be still as bright. For the sword outwears its sheath, and the soul wears out the breast, and the heart must pause to breathe and love itself have rest. So we see in the first stanza, he's telling us that he's never going to go roving again. He feels like his body is not going to let him do anything. It's not going to let him go out late at night. He has to get his rest. Even though he still loves as much as he always did. Even though the moon is as bright as it always was. And then we see some metaphors, some imagery relating to this deterioration of the body. The sword outwears its sheath. There's the sword damaging the sheath that protects it. But the sword goes into the sheath and damages it, and eventually you have to replace your sheath. And just as in that case, we're seeing an analogy here, the soul wears out the breast. So we have our soul inside us, but it's somehow damaging our body, our breast. And that's what happens as we age. Our body deteriorates, possibly, according to Byron, due to the soul. And the heart must pause to breathe and love itself have rest. We can't just be constantly excited about things. We can't constantly have our hearts beating. We have to take a break and just have rest. And we can't rest during the day, so we've got to rest at night. Though the night was made for loving, and the day returns too soon, yet we'll go no more a-roving by the light of the moon. And I do like this grammatical construction. It's something that I found quite bizarre when I first came to this poem. He says, though the night was made for loving, and the day returns too soon. So he actually gives us this sort of but clause. He's saying, oh, well, yes, this is the case. And then he gives us another but clause, another oh, however, that sort of goes back on the initial clause. Though this, yet this other thing, though it is true that the night is made for loving, yet we'll go no more a-roving by the light of the moon. He's really in two minds, isn't he? He really wants to go a-roving at night, but he really knows that he's not going to.